Before we begin, I want you to remember something. There are mothers who would give up everything they own just to give their children one more chance to live. They don't dream of luxury. They don't expect to be repaid. All they ever hope for is that one day, the child they loved more than life itself will be there to hold their hand when they grow old. But what happens when that very child becomes the one who shows them the door? Can a wound like that ever truly heal? That morning, the air was unusually cold. An old suitcase rested quietly on the front porch. Beside it stood an elderly woman with silver hair. Her frail hands clutched a worn leather handbag whose straps had long since begun to crack. She wasn't crying. She wasn't begging. She simply stared at the front door. A house she had sacrificed everything to make possible. Inside, a man in his mid-30s stood with his arms crossed. His face was cold, almost unrecognizable. His name was Ethan Carter, her only son. More than 20 years earlier, he had been lying in a hospital bed. After doctors told the family he had only one chance to survive. To save him, Margaret Carter sold the last home she owned. She sold her wedding ring. She sold every valuable possession she had. And when there was nothing left to sell, she started over with absolutely nothing, simply because she couldn't bear the thought of losing her son. The day Ethan was discharged from the hospital, he wrapped his arms around his mother and cried like a little boy. "Mom, I promise, one day I'll take care of you. You'll never have to suffer again." Margaret believed every word, with all her heart, because she thought a promise made between life and death could never be broken. She was wrong. Years passed. Age caught up with her. So did illness. And the son who had once sworn to protect her forever opened the front door, set her old suitcase on the porch, looked her in the eyes, and quietly said the words that left every neighbor frozen in disbelief. "Mom, you need to leave. From today on, you are no longer welcome in this house." What no one knew was that Margaret gently smiled, because inside the worn handbag she still held against her chest was an old sealed envelope, one that had never been opened, and the moment its contents were finally revealed, Ethan would realize that what he had just thrown away wasn't simply his mother. It was the most valuable thing he would never be able to buy back. 26 years ago, Seattle disappeared beneath days of relentless rain. At the end of a quiet neighborhood street, a small apartment echoed every afternoon with the laughter of an 8-year-old boy. His name was Ethan Carter. To Ethan, life was beautifully simple. He had a father. He had a mother. He had a home where the porch light was always waiting for him at night. And no matter how busy life became, the Carter family never missed dinner together. Ethan's father, William Carter, worked as a carpenter. He wasn't a wealthy man, but everyone who knew him respected him for one reason: his honesty. Every evening after work, William would stop by the neighborhood bakery. He'd buy a small apple pie. Then he'd walk through the front door wearing the same warm smile. Attention, Carter family. Who wants dessert? Ethan was always the first one racing toward him. Meanwhile, Margaret Carter would quietly watch the two of them from the kitchen, smiling without saying a word. Looking back, those were the happiest days of her life. But happiness can disappear far more quickly than we ever imagine. One ordinary morning, William never showed up for work. His coworkers called. No answer. Again, no answer. A terrible feeling settled in Margaret's heart. She rushed into the bedroom and found William lying motionless on the floor. His phone was still clutched in his hand. The ambulance arrived within minutes. The doctors did everything they possibly could. But the stroke had been too severe. Within only a few hours, William Carter was gone. That day, 8-year-old Ethan didn't understand what death really meant. He kept asking the same question. When is Dad coming home? I haven't even shown him my perfect math test yet. Margaret couldn't answer. She simply wrapped her arms around her son, and for the first time in her life, she cried until there were no tears left. After the funeral, everyone had advice. Some relatives told her to sell the apartment. Others suggested sending Ethan to live with his grandparents. Some even encouraged her to remarry. Everyone believed the same thing. A 39-year-old widow couldn't possibly raise a child on her own. But Margaret refused every suggestion. That night, she sat alone in front of William's photograph. The apartment was silent, except for the soft glow of a single lamp. She reached out, resting her hand gently against the picture frame. Then she whispered, "William, I promise you, I'll raise Ethan the best I can. I'll make sure he grows into a good and honorable man. That's my promise to you from that night forward." Margaret's life had only two purposes: work and Ethan. During the day, she worked in a garment factory. After her shift, she washed dishes in a local restaurant. Late at night, she brought sewing work home to earn a little extra money. There were nights when the clock crept past 2 in the morning. Every house on the block had gone dark. Only one window remained lit, Margaret's. She sat alone behind an old sewing machine. Her eyes burned with exhaustion. Her fingertips were covered in tiny needle marks. All so that, the next morning, Ethan would have enough money to join his classmates on a school field trip. She never allowed her son to feel less fortunate than the other children. If Ethan needed new books, she went without buying herself a new coat. If Ethan needed new shoes, she wore the same worn-out pair for another year. And if Ethan dreamed of going to college, she was willing to work until her body simply couldn't go on anymore. Every night, before going to bed, Margaret quietly stepped into Ethan's room. She pulled the blanket over his shoulders, brushed the hair away from his forehead, and whispered the same words, almost like a prayer. "As long as you're healthy, every sacrifice I make is worth it." She had no way of knowing that years later, those very words would become the reason she paid the greatest price of her entire life. The years passed, and Ethan Carter grew into exactly the kind of man Margaret had always hoped he would become. He was intelligent, hardworking, kind, the kind of son who never gave his mother a reason to worry. After graduating from college, Ethan landed his first job as a software engineer at a technology company in Seattle. The day he received his very first paycheck, he drove straight home. In one hand, he carried a small bouquet of flowers. In the other, a chocolate cake from Margaret's favorite bakery. The moment Margaret opened the front door, Ethan wrapped her in a tight embrace. "Mom, I did it. I finally have a real job," Margaret smiled, her eyes filled with tears. Years later, she still couldn't remember how long she held him in that hug. She only remembered what she was feeling. After more than 20 years of sacrifice, this was the moment she had dreamed about. That evening, the two of them sat together in their little kitchen. It wasn't a fancy meal, but to Margaret, it tasted like victory. Ethan smiled across the table. "Mom, I'm gonna save every dollar I can. One day I'll buy you a beautiful house. You'll never have to work again," Margaret laughed softly. She reached over, ruffling his hair the same way she had when he was a little boy. "I don't need a big house. All I want is for you to keep coming home for dinner. That's more than enough for me." To Margaret, that was happiness, nothing more, nothing less. Over the following months, it finally felt as though life had begun smiling on the Carter family. Margaret gave up one of her part-time jobs. For the first time in years, she had enough free time to plant flowers outside the house. Every morning, she watered them with a quiet smile. For the first time in decades, she allowed herself to believe that perhaps the hardest part of her life was finally behind her. But fate had one more cruel lesson waiting. One cold winter evening, Margaret's phone rang. The voice on the other end sounded urgent. "Ma'am, are you a relative of Ethan Carter?" Her heart instantly dropped. "Yes, I'm his mother. What's happened?" There was a brief silence. Then came the words every parent fears. "Your son has been involved in a serious car accident. Please come to Harborview Medical Center immediately." The phone slipped from Margaret's hand. During the drive to the hospital, she barely remembered stopping at red lights, or how she had gotten there at all. She repeated only one prayer, over and over again. "Please, don't take my son away from me." When she arrived, Ethan was already in emergency surgery. His face was covered in blood. Machines surrounded his hospital bed. Tubes and monitors covered nearly every inch of his body. A doctor finally stepped into the waiting room. He looked at Margaret for a long moment before speaking carefully. "We've managed to stop the bleeding. But your son suffered severe liver trauma without immediate surgery. His chances of survival are very slim." Margaret nearly collapsed. She grabbed the back of a nearby chair just to stay on her feet. Her voice barely escaped her lips. How much will it cost?" The doctor lowered his eyes to the chart, then quietly gave her the number. In that instant, Margaret felt her entire world fall apart. The cost was greater than every dollar she had managed to save over a lifetime, greater than everything she owned. She sat alone in the hospital hallway. Inside her purse, she had only a few $100s. Outside, rain began falling against the windows. Margaret opened her wallet and stared at an old family photograph. There she was, William and little Ethan, smiling without a care in the world. She gently traced William's face with her thumb, then whispered, "William, I'm sorry. I couldn't protect our home. But if I have to choose, I'll choose our son." The very next morning, Margaret signed the paperwork to sell the house. The house she and William had spent nearly 20 years working to buy. The house that held every precious memory of their family. Ethan's first steps, birthday celebrations, holiday dinners, even the marks on the hallway wall showing how much he had grown each year. She gave it all away, without negotiating, without hesitation, because to Margaret, another house could always be bought, furniture could always be replaced. But if she lost Ethan, there would be no life left for her to rebuild. A few hours later, she walked back into Harborview Medical Center. A cashier's check trembled in her hands. Her body shook with exhaustion, but her eyes had never looked more determined. She placed every last dollar on the payment counter, then quietly said just one sentence. "Please, save my son." That was the day. Margaret gave away everything she had spent a lifetime building. And it was also the day she believed with all her heart that a child whose life had been saved by his mother's sacrifice could never forget what she had done. Sadly, life doesn't always repay love with gratitude. The surgery lasted nearly 11 hours. Margaret sat alone in the cold hospital hallway. She didn't eat. She didn't drink. She never once stepped away from the operating room doors. In her hand, she held William's old wedding band. It was the only thing she had kept before selling their family home. Whenever fear threatened to overwhelm her, she closed her fingers tightly around the ring, as though, somehow, her late husband was still beside her. Just before sunrise, the operating room doors finally opened. The surgeon removed his mask. Then, for the first time that night, he smiled. "The surgery was successful. Your son is going to make it." Margaret broke down in tears. These weren't tears of despair anymore. They were the tears of a mother who had just been given her entire world back. A few days later, Ethan finally regained consciousness. The very first thing he saw was his mother asleep in a chair beside his hospital bed. Her hair looked noticeably grayer than it had only weeks before. Her hands were wrapped in small bandages, still bearing the wounds from months of working herself beyond exhaustion. Softly, he whispered, "Mom." Margaret's eyes opened immediately. The moment she realized he was awake, a smile spread across her face. "You're awake." "Thank God." Ethan stared at her for a long moment. His voice trembled. "Mom, the doctors told me everything. You sold the house." Margaret gently shook her head. "Don't think about that. You're alive. That's all that matters." Tears streamed down Ethan's face. He reached for her hand, holding it as tightly as he could. "I promise you, from this day forward, I'll take care of you. I'll buy you an even better home. You'll never have to sacrifice another thing for me again." Margaret smiled. She believed every word, because the look in Ethan's eyes was the same sincere look she'd seen when he was a little boy. Underscore 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 underscore. 2 years later, it seemed Ethan had kept his promise. He worked tirelessly. Promotion after promotion came his way. His salary grew every year. Then one evening, during dinner, he slid a folder across the table toward his mother. "Mom, I bought a house." Margaret looked at him in disbelief. "You did?" Ethan grinned. "This time, you'll never have to live in a rented apartment again." The day they moved into the new house, Margaret stood quietly in the front yard for a long time. The house wasn't extravagant, but it felt warm, peaceful, safe. She gently touched the front door and whispered, "Thank you, son." For the first time in many years, she truly believed that every sacrifice she had ever made had finally been worth it. Not long afterward, Ethan met Olivia. Olivia was beautiful, confident, charming. The very first time she met Margaret, she hugged her warmly. "Ethan has told me so much about you. Honestly, I admire you more than you know," Margaret smiled, quietly thanking God in her heart. She believed her son had found a wonderful woman. Nearly a year later, they were married. During the wedding reception, Ethan stood before all of their family and friends, then turned toward his mother. "The person I owe everything to is my mom. Without her, I wouldn't be standing here today." The guests rose to their feet. The room filled with applause. Margaret wiped tears from her eyes. She truly believed the hardest years of her life were finally over. Underscore, 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 underscore. But after the wedding, something began to change. At first, it was only fewer phone calls. Then, weekend dinners were canceled because Ethan was too busy. Later, even when he came home, his eyes rarely left his phone. Margaret tried to comfort herself. "He's grown now. He has his own family. I shouldn't be a burden." So she never complained. She never questioned him. She never blamed him. Even on the evenings, when she sat alone at the dinner table, quietly placing a second set of dishes on the table, only to put them away untouched a little later. One afternoon, Margaret baked Ethan's favorite apple pie. She carried it to his house herself. As she stood outside the front door, she heard Olivia speaking inside. "We can't keep your mother living here forever. This house isn't big enough. We have to think about our own future and about the children we'll have someday." There was a long silence. Then Ethan finally answered, quietly, almost reluctantly. "I know. I'll figure something out." Margaret froze. She couldn't move. She couldn't breathe. She never knocked. Instead, she quietly placed the apple pie on the front porch, turned around, and walked away without making a sound. On the drive home, she kept trying to comfort herself. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe they were talking about something else, because she simply couldn't believe that the son who had once promised to care for her for the rest of her life could ever see his own mother as a burden. What Margaret didn't know was that this was only the beginning. A far greater storm was already gathering, silently, patiently. And this time, it would sweep away, the very last piece of hope still living inside a mother's heart. In the months that followed, Margaret kept telling herself, everything would be okay. Maybe Ethan was just overwhelmed with work. Maybe life had become too demanding. Maybe Olivia was under a lot of stress. As a mother, she always found a reason to protect her son, even when she was the one being hurt. Underscore, 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 underscore. One crisp autumn morning, Margaret was watering the flowers outside the house when Ethan unexpectedly pulled into the driveway. It had been a long time since he had visited her alone. Her face lit up with joy. She almost forgot she was still holding the watering can. "Ethan, come inside! I just baked your favorite apple pie." But Ethan didn't move. He remained standing in the yard. His hands were tightly clasped together. His eyes never quite met hers. "Mom, there's something we need to talk about." A strange feeling settled over Margaret. She had never seen her son look this uneasy. The two of them sat together in the living room. The silence felt unusually heavy. Nearly a full minute passed before Ethan finally spoke. "Mom, Olivia and A. We've decided to sell the house." Margaret blinked. "Sell it? But isn't this your home?" Ethan took a slow, uneasy breath. "We want to buy a bigger place, closer to downtown. It'll be better for work and for our future." Margaret forced a smile. "Well, if that's what you want, then I'm happy for you. I'll help you pack." Ethan lowered his head when he finally spoke again. His voice was barely above a whisper. "Mom, the new house doesn't have a room for you." The words struck her, like a knife driven straight through her heart. Margaret didn't respond. She simply sat there, unable to speak. After a long silence, she somehow managed a smile. "It's all right. I can rent a small apartment," Ethan answered quickly. "I'll pay the rent. I'll still take care of you," Margaret nodded. She didn't want to make this harder for him. She didn't want him to feel guilty. Because throughout her entire life, she had always placed her son's happiness above her own. Underscore 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 underscore. 3 months later, the sale was finalized. Ethan drove Margaret to a small apartment on the outskirts of Seattle. The building was old. The walls were damp. There was only one tiny bedroom. Margaret slowly looked around, then turned toward her son. Smiling gently, she said, "I'll be just fine here." "Don't worry about me," Ethan hugged her. "For the first time in years," he cried. "I'm sorry, Mom. Just give me a few years." "I'll bring you home," Margaret gently wiped away his tears, just as she had when he was a little boy. "You don't have to apologize. I believe you." And she truly did. Just as years before, she had believed selling her home to save Ethan's life had been the right decision. Underscore 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 underscore. But those few years never came. Ethan's phone calls became less frequent. His visits changed from every weekend to once a month, then once every 3 months, then 6. Eventually, there were only short text messages. "How are you, Mom?" "Sorry, work's been crazy," Margaret always replied the same way. "I'm doing fine. Take good care of yourself." She never told him that her arthritis had grown worse, or that some nights, the pain was so severe, she couldn't even stand without holding onto the furniture. She refused to burden him. Underscore 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 underscore. Then one day, her doctor asked Margaret to step into his office. He quietly placed her medical file on the desk. His expression said everything before he spoke. "Mrs. Carter, your test results came back. You have pancreatic cancer. It's already in an advanced stage." Margaret sat completely still. She didn't ask how much time she had left. Instead, she asked only one question. "Will the treatment be very expensive?" The doctor looked at her with genuine sympathy. "Yes, treatment could extend your life, but it will be costly." Margaret simply smiled. A quiet, almost peaceful smile. She thanked the doctor, then walked out alone. During the drive home, she never cried. The illness itself wasn't what hurt the most. What truly broke her heart was one single thought. "I can't become Ethan's burden." That evening, she called her son. "Ethan, I'd like to see you." The following day, he came. Margaret handed him the medical report. As he read it, the color slowly drained from his face. Before he could speak, Olivia broke the silence. "If she starts treatment, it's going to cost a fortune. We're still paying off the mortgage. Emily will be starting college soon. We simply can't afford another financial burden." Margaret lowered her eyes. Softly, she said, "I understand. I only wanted you to know. I wasn't asking for money." Ethan never said a word. And somehow, his silence hurt far more than any refusal ever could. Margaret slowly stood, then forced one final smile. "Don't worry about me. I'll take care of myself." She had no idea that the decision Ethan would make only days later would become the final wound, the one that would completely shatter the heart of a mother who had spent her entire life loving her son without asking for anything in return. 3 days later, Margaret received a phone call from Ethan. His voice was calm, almost emotionless. "Mom, I'll come pick you up," Margaret smiled. For the first time in days, hope returned to her heart. Maybe her son had changed his mind. Maybe he was finally bringing her home. She carefully changed into her nicest dress. It was the one William had given her on their 15th wedding anniversary. The fabric had faded over the years, but she had treasured it ever since. Inside her worn handbag, she packed only a few belongings: a small suitcase of clothes, her Bible, William's wedding ring, and one old brown envelope, sealed for more than 20 years. She had never opened it. William had made her promise. "Only open this when you truly have no other choice." For more than 2 decades, Margaret had never believed that day would come. Underscore 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 underscore. Ethan's car pulled into the driveway of his new home. Margaret stepped out, taking in the beautiful house, the perfectly trimmed lawn, the spacious front yard. A gentle smile appeared on her face. Her son had finally built the life he had always dreamed of. Quietly, she thanked God. At least, everything she had sacrificed had not been in vain. But just as Margaret reached for the front door, Olivia stepped in front of her, blocking the entrance. Her voice was cold. "You can't come in." Margaret looked at her in confusion. "Ethan," I thought. Ethan couldn't meet his mother's eyes. He took a deep breath, then quietly placed her old suitcase on the front porch. "Mom, I found a nursing home for you. They'll be able to take care of you there." Margaret stood frozen. She looked at her son. Her voice trembled. "I don't want to live in a nursing home. I only want to stay close to you." Olivia folded her arms. "If you stay here, who's going to take care of you? I can't quit my job. Ethan works all day. This is the best solution for everyone." Margaret slowly turned back toward her son. There was no anger left in her eyes, no resentment, only hope. A tiny, fragile hope. She needed him to say only 4 words. "Stay with us, Mom." That was all. Just one sentence. Instead, Ethan lowered his head, barely able to speak. "I'm sorry. I don't have another choice." In that moment, Margaret understood. The little boy who had once clung to her in a hospital room was gone. The man standing before her now measured everything by convenience. Margaret slowly nodded, her eyes filled with tears. "All right, I'll go." She didn't cry, she didn't beg, she didn't blame anyone. She simply bent down, picked up her old suitcase, and quietly turned away. Across the street, neighbors watched in complete silence. No one said a word, but every pair of eyes was fixed on Ethan, filled with disappointment. Underscore. Margaret had only taken a few steps. When she stopped, she slowly turned around, reached into her handbag, and pulled out the old brown envelope. Its edges yellowed with age. She walked back toward Ethan, placed it gently into his hands, then spoke with remarkable calm. "Your father told me that I was only to give this to you. When the day came that I could no longer stay by your side," Ethan stared at the envelope, confused. "Mom, what is this?" Margaret smiled softly. "I've never opened it either. But I think today is the right day." Without another word, she turned around and quietly walked away. She never looked back. Underscore 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 underscore. Ethan remained standing on the porch for what felt like forever. Finally, he broke the seal. Inside, there was no money, no will, no legal documents, only a handwritten letter, written by William Carter. The ink had faded with time. His hands trembled as he unfolded the pages. The very first sentence made his heart stop. "If you're reading this, then your mother has probably endured the greatest pain of her life." Ethan swallowed hard, his vision blurred. He kept reading. "I don't know whether I'll still be alive when this letter reaches you, but I know one thing with absolute certainty. Your mother will sacrifice everything she has to protect you." The first tear landed on the page, then another. He He reached the final paragraph. William had written, "If the day ever comes when your mother is forced to leave the home she helped build, then you've already failed. Not because you became poor, but because you lost your character. Always remember, the most successful person isn't the one who earns the most money. It's the one who never allows his parents to cry because of him." The letter slipped from Ethan's hands. He collapsed onto the front porch. For the first time in many years, he finally understood that he had just thrown away the most precious person he would ever have. But by then, Margaret was already gone, and Ethan had no idea that it would be the last time he would ever see his mother alive. "Ethan!" Olivia rushed out of the house in panic. She had never seen her husband like this before. Ethan had collapsed onto the front steps. His trembling hands clutched his father's letter so tightly. The paper had begun to wrinkle. Tears streamed endlessly down his face. For years, he had believed he was a good son. He worked hard, built a successful career, bought a beautiful home, made sure his daughter attended the best schools, he thought. That was what success looked like. But after reading the final words of his father's letter, he finally understood. He had failed at the one thing that mattered most. Underscore, 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 underscore. Without saying another word, Ethan ran to his car. He called his mother's phone. Once. Twice. 10 times. No answer. He sped toward the tiny apartment on the outskirts of Seattle. The door was already locked. The building manager looked at Ethan, then sighed quietly. "Messrs. Margaret Carter checked out this morning. She told us she wouldn't be coming back." Ethan felt his chest tighten. "Where did she go?" The manager slowly shook his head. "She only left the address of a nursing home." Ethan drove there immediately, but the woman at the front desk checked the records, then gently said, "Messrs. Carter never checked in. She only stopped by briefly. Before leaving, she told us she didn't want to become a burden to her son. She walked away a few hours ago." Ethan stood frozen. From that moment on, he searched everywhere: city parks, churches, bus stations, the small diner where his mother loved having coffee. She wasn't anywhere. No one had seen her. Underscore, 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 underscore. 3 days later, Ethan's phone rang. The caller was Harborview Medical Center. "Is Margaret Carter your mother?" His entire body began to shake. "Yes, I'm her son. She's here. Please come immediately." Ethan raced to the hospital. When he entered the room, Margaret was lying quietly in bed. Her face had grown pale. Her body looked impossibly fragile. Yet the moment she saw her son, she smiled. "Ethan, you came." Ethan dropped to his knees beside her bed. He held her thin hand tightly in both of his. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I was wrong. Come home with me. I'll take care of you. I'll fix everything." Margaret gently brushed her fingers through his hair, the same way she had when he was a frightened little boy. "I know. You're not a bad person. You simply let life make you forget what truly matters." Ethan broke down completely. "Please, give me one more chance," Margaret smiled. There wasn't a trace of resentment in her eyes. Only love, the same unconditional love she had carried her entire life. "I forgave you a long time ago because you'll always be my son." Those were the last words she ever spoke. Margaret slowly closed her eyes. Her fingers gradually relaxed until her hand slipped gently from Ethan's grasp. A long, steady tone filled the hospital room. Then, silence. Ethan wrapped his arms around his mother's lifeless body and cried like the 8-year-old boy who had once lost his father. Only this time, there was no one left to hold him. underscore 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 underscore. 1 year later, Ethan sold the mansion. Using the money, he established the Margaret Carter Foundation. Its mission was simple: to help elderly mothers living alone and patients who couldn't afford life-saving medical treatment. At the center of the foundation's courtyard stood a small stone monument, engraved with words Ethan had written himself. The richest person isn't the one who owns the most. It's the one who still has the chance to hold their mother's hand. Every week, Ethan brought a bouquet of white flowers to Margaret's grave. He sat there for hours, talking to her, telling her about his daughter, about the foundation, about the life he was trying to live, to honor the woman who had given him everything. But Ethan understood something now, better than anyone else. Some debts can be repaid with money. Some mistakes can be corrected with time. But a mother's love, once you've lost the chance to cherish it, is something you will never be able to get back a second time. There are some gifts in life that we never truly appreciate until they're gone. Our parents don't need luxurious homes. They don't need expensive presents. More than anything, they simply want to feel loved while they're still here to receive it. Don't wait until you're standing in front of a gravestone to whisper the words, "I'm sorry, underscore. Thank you for spending your time with Veritale and staying with us until the very end of today's story. If this story touched your heart or made you think about the people you love most, please take a moment to subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next story. Because sometimes the next story may be exactly the one you need to hear. Thank you again, and we'll see you in our next video. Every story leaves a lesson. Every lesson shapes a life. This is Veritale. We'll see you in the next story.